Hey people, what up? Thanks for tuning into another episode of Books and Brown Liquor. Okay, this is it's your girl Tanya. This is my book review of The Lost Village by Camilla Sten. I think in the past I said Camilla Stern by accident, but her name is Camilla Sten. This is a Swedish author. This is my first book that I read by her, and I did enjoy it. It was very creepy, very atmospheric. The Lost Village. Okay, so have you ever seen those shows? And I watch weird stuff like this because I'm like addicted to like ghost hunters, and I've always loved a good ghost story. But there's that show called like Haunted Towns, where like an entire town is just left in ruins and there's like no people there for years. This is a story like that. This is this is the story of a small town in Sweden called Silvertjärn. Or Silvertjärn. I don't speak Swedish, so I don't really know how to say that, but the town is called Silvertjärn, and it has been completely abandoned since the 1950s. So houses, a church, a schoolhouse, left empty. And back in the 50s, the only two things found was a woman tied to a post that had been stoned to death back in the 50s, and like a newborn baby left in the nurse's office at the old schoolhouse. Other than that, not another soul was found. Whew. Okay. The story is told in two timelines, then and now. I like her writing, okay? The current time period, it is the main character is Alice, and it's 5 characters in the current timeline now. And it's Alice and like her film crew. And she goes to this small town to film a documentary. Basically, her grandmother was one of the patrons of this town, you know, before it ever went up and left. So she's always had, you know, this passion for this story. She always wanted to, it's a passion of hers to do a documentary on what happened in this small town. So she's looking for clues, you know, paperwork, letters, anything she can get her hands on to link her to any clues to what has happened. So like I said, 5 people, a film crew, they go there amongst these ruins and they start, you know, digging, taking pictures, filming and things like that. And the other timeline, which is referred to as then, it describes the events that led up to the disappearance of all these people. So it's pretty interesting to read not only what's going on currently, but the events in the past that took place. So it's really well written. It's not like a typical cliche horror story because there isn't a like bad guy per se. Like there's no Jason or Michael walking around. But when this film crew gets here, it is a very ominous atmosphere because they suspect they're not alone. At first they don't know it, but they suspect they're not alone. So that's creepy because the whole town's abandoned. Who could possibly be here after all these years? So when they get there, when they finally arrive, because it's very secluded, like you got to go through they go through all kind of stuff just to get there. When they get there, you know, they set up camp, get the film ready, get their walkie-talkies going, and as they proceed to create this documentary, things just start happening that is preventing them from making this documentary. So everyone is like on board with creating this great film. They're there for like a few days. Time is tight. The budget is tight. So we ain't got time for messing around. But as they start to proceed with their documentary, things just start going wrong all the time. Is it a coincidence or is it something else? Is what you're thinking when you're reading it. And then the timeline to the past, you can kind of see, you don't know exactly why these people disappear, but you can see there is tension building. There's tension building around a new, you know how a small town, everybody knows everybody? And then this one person joins this small town and it's the talk of the town. You notice that once this person arrives in this town, things start changing and not for the good. So that's interesting. That's interesting. So this story is like a very slow burn. As you're reading, you can kind of feel the tension building. I like the fact that this storyteller, this writer, she takes her time in building that tension. And even though it does seem to move slow, the things that are happening are creepy because we are alone, right? So I don't want to give it away, but it's just, you know, like when you're alone and you're like walking through an old abandoned house and then you're like, were those footsteps? You know, so I think it's really well done. This book is compared to The Blair Witch Project meets Midsummer. And I think that is very accurate. Because if y'all remember, you know, back in the day, The Blair Witch Project was a huge hit. And I think what made that story so intriguing is it was all like documented on VHS, or I don't know if it was VHS, but on camera. Like, you know, the shaky camera running, it felt so real. And I think that's how this story feels. It feels real. It feels like it's really happening. So it does remind you of the Blair Witch because you got a bunch of people, they show up with their cameras and they start digging. So in that aspect, it is like the Blair Witch. And then once they do get into like her, you know, her woods on the Blair Witch Project and they get to like her old house. And then once they get there, it's like, you don't really see the Blair Witch, but you see they start coming undone by the events that take place. So this story is just like that. You don't really see a bad guy, but shit just starts going awry, left and right. And it's creepy because you're like, okay, is this a coincidence or is there another reason why we can't get nothing on film? Just saying. And yeah, does the documentary ever get made? No comment. But and as far as like Midsummer, this does take place in Sweden, and Midsummer did take place in like one of those Scandinavian countries where the people talk like this. Yeah, it does remind you of Midsummer. I think that Midsummer was like, what made that story so creepy is the surroundings were so serene and beautiful. You would never expect people to get murdered on a hilltop filled with sunshine and wildflowers and people dancing and holding hands, and they have crowns of flowers on their head. There's no way these people are murderers. And then you see someone get murdered and it's like, hey, you're not supposed to get murdered, the sun's shining. You know, like most scary movies, they take place where it's a dark, ominous backdrop. It's always at night. The weather's always bad. It's always dark and creepy. And Midsummer was so jarring because all this crazy shit is happening on sunshine. Oh yeah, come and have a picnic with us. It was just, that's what made it creepy to me. It looked like The Sound of Music meets Friday the 13th. It was creepy as fuck. But the sun was shining and there were flowers everywhere. Anyway, so this does kind of remind me of Midsummer because fucking landscapers. Anyway, it did remind me of Midsummer in that sense, especially when they go to the past. It's sometimes the most horrifying things happen in a location that you would never expect them to. Like a sunshine hilltop or a church or the village town square where people walk by and do shopping. So I like this book. It was very creepy. It was very atmospheric. This wasn't your typical horror movie because like I said, there isn't really like a bad guy yielding a knife. But I think the creepy, ominous buildup is what draws you in. And then when you get to the conclusion, it's like, oh, yeah. So I enjoyed it. I recommend it. I like this author. I will look for more of her stuff. She is Swedish, so a lot of her books are not English. So I will try. But I did like it. I do recommend it. Yeah. And again, thank you for watching as always. I wish you good reading, people. Bye.